Hi guys, it's Nikki. I'm here today to review the first book on my list, Ready Player One. With these book reviews, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it into two parts. This is the first part, the spoiler-free part. I'll try not to reveal any huge plot twists or character development. It's just going to be a summary of the book, the characters, and just my general likes and dislikes. And I'll be started shortly here. The summary is kind of this kid, Wade Watts. He's in high school and he regularly plugs into this program called Oasis. It's big virtual reality system, and it's basically engulfed their society. But there's this race to try to find this massive power and fortune and fame called Halliday's Easter egg. And that's the basic driver of the story, is him racing against these other people who are willing to kill or pay or do basically anything to get this before him. And it's a fun little adventure, and, well, not always fun, but a fun little adventure. And it's set kind of in the near future, so it has this very kind of dystopian, near-apocalyptic feel. It's not post-apocalyptic, but it's close. Like I said, I do enjoy this book. I've read it a handful of times. So this is the spoiler-free half, and I've broken it down, this first part, into my likes and dislikes of the book. You'll find that in this case, because I did enjoy the book so much, that the likes will outweigh the dislikes. And I tried to be a little bit unbiased, but honestly, this is my book review and this is my opinion. One of the big things I loved was that near post-apocalyptic feel. Like, you had a very dystopian society that are on the verge of breaking, but they haven't broken yet. And I really liked that, as opposed to the kind of post-apocalyptic dystopians that you get where the world's fallen apart already and they're picking their pieces up. This is before the break and hoping the pieces don't fall to begin with. The other thing I really liked is that the geek culture was so prevalent. I am a huge nerd and geek myself, so having it be woven into the story like this was it was delicious for me. And the big thing there was like that they had all these 1980s references in it as well, built into this geek culture, just like that burgeoning video game world was being incorporated into this world where technology is almost exclusively taken over. And it was a good contrast, and I really liked it. And because it was such a big driver, it never felt forced when the references were made. It was very natural and seemed to be very much a part of the story, which I really liked. The other thing was that the characters were relatable, and I'll talk about this more kind of when I go into the impressions of the characters, but they were well written. They developed somewhat naturally, and they're all teenagers, so every single one kind of did something where I was like, I remember doing that, and that was really nice and made the characters really relatable for myself. I actually got my fiance to read this book because he is such a huge geek as well, and he said that his favorite part was that the main character was so relatable, just being like nerdy and awkward and just so devastatingly average that you couldn't help but relate to him in some way. The other thing I really enjoyed was how well-paced the story was, unlike my book review here. But the story was just so well-paced. There was never too much action going on or too much filler going on. It was a good combination. The only times I ever felt it dragging were kind of when you went back to the IRL portions of the book, and that had more to do with how society was set up, and because this guy's a teenager, his inability to get from place to place to place, just because you're a teenager and you're poor and things are harder because of that. And from there, with the story being well paced, I also really enjoyed its use of like greater good versus greater evil. Although it is a fairly typical story, just that good versus evil idea, I really liked how the dystopian setting and just kind of like the prevalence of technology really changed how the greater evil and greater good was both perceived and how they accomplished their goals. I thought it added a really nice twist to a pretty basic story, which leads me again to the use of technology in the story, which I really enjoyed. it was really interesting because it was so integrated with society that you had them using the technology financially, socially, and really people were just using it to get out of reality. And it really helped cement the story and why the egg hunt, or this race for power and fortune, was so important, and why people were so determined to get it when you compared it to their real life. And I really liked how the technology really cemented that and allowed for you to see the differences between the two, both in how technology was used and what was used. Because of this accessibility, it really allowed the characters to achieve what they wanted to, and there was that unlimited potential because everybody was able to use it, and I really liked that. And this brings me to my dislikes. It's a short list. It delves into just a couple things. One, which was more of a what the heck moment, it was that certain things on the internet were easily accessed, like the dark web, or deep web, whatever you want to call it. This teenage boy accessed it easily and didn't have any problems proving who he was, or it was just very weird, and I thought it would have been a lot harder and a lot more work and a lot more money. Then you get into the next point, which is the evil megacorp, which is IOI. And it made sense how it was written. It really, really did. I was a little upset that it was just capitalist greed was the driving force for the company. So, although I enjoyed the greater good versus greater evil that I talked about earlier, I was just a little disappointed at how shallow the greater evil turned out to be. And then my final thing was probably the biggest issue I had with the story. It hooked me really early, which was awesome, but after it hooked me, it dumped so much lore and information on me that I actually had to put it down to process everything that the author gave me, so I was up to speed. And while I understand the need for that, because of how the story is paced, the fact that he does it so well and so effortlessly later, just acquiring additional knowledge and having characters share it, just made me a little sad that it was just all dumped on you in this kind of monologue of the main character in the beginning. So again, like, it's not a huge thing, but it was probably my biggest dislike of this book. And with that, I move on to the characters. I'll talk about the three main characters who not necessarily that I liked the most, although I did like all three of them. They're just who I think are the three big characters in the story. You have your main protagonist, Wade, and then you have H and Artemis. I actually really liked all three of them, especially Wade. He was geeky and nerdy and awkward and introverted, and I found him a lot of fun to read. That being said, I'm a little biased because how I just described Wade is also how I would describe my fiance. So as I said, as you can see, a smidge biased. And then on top of that, their interests are very similar. But beyond that, with Wade, I really liked how he was written, very typical teenager. It resulted in some face palms and some eye rolls, but you also kind of cheered him on and wanted to pat him on the back when he made a good decision. And along with that, like I said, with the eye rolls, you had those angsty moods, you had the depressions, that awkward interactions with the opposite sex that were kind of just a lot of fun to read. And then you move into the geeky part, which certainly didn't help any of the teenager parts. And he just has this vast geek knowledge of everything Halliday had written, which was it was so interesting just to watch him interact with his friends and just reference all of these things. And because I enjoy the geek culture and kind of the throwback to the 1980s, I found it that much more enjoyable to read Wade's interactions because of those references. And then you get into kind of the final thing I actually kind of liked about Wade, which will sound oddly specific. I liked that his socioeconomic status was relatable. He wasn't so high up that he had everything. In fact, he was pretty poverty-stricken, and really he struggled a lot to get where he needed to be. And I guess I liked being able to see that struggle, and for that struggle to just exist in general. The fact that he didn't get everything handed to him really made his achievements that much greater. I found. And I found myself wanting to pat him on the back more when he did certain things, because you got so excited for him because he did it despite these things. And it also allowed for some of those really horrible but silly purchases when he gets some money, and it's so much fun. Just reading his character and his journey. And that actually moved me over towards the next character, H. H doesn't start off as a dynamic character, but becomes one very quickly. And I really liked that aspect of becoming fleshed out as the story went, and just becoming greater and greater in terms of what their character is and is able to do. And that allowed for their backstory to be very interesting, which I really enjoyed learning about it. And then it go on to this, just one final thing about H. And it's honestly the thing I like the most, because H is just this great person and just caring and loyal, and he was Wade's best friend when Wade did not have a lot of friends. And even as the story progresses, they stay pretty close. They have a few kind of teenagery issues arise between them, but that's to be expected. This is a book about teenagers. You're not going to avoid it, no matter how much you want to. And just their interactions and H's friendship with Wade just will always place H in a special part of my heart, because I love that loyalty, and I felt it made H just that extra important character. And then that'll move me on to Artemis, who is the third of the three characters I'm going to talk about. And I did like her quite a bit as well. She was intelligent, nerdy, geeky, well-written, and she just had this great personality. And I enjoyed her interactions with everyone else. Like I said, you got the fun kind of teenagery interactions as well as the eye-rolly ones. I found, especially with interactions with Artemis, you get a few more eye roll moments, because every once in a while she'll do the teenage drama thing, and it's just, you can't help but roll your eyes sometimes before you move on. And although sometimes, I won't say it was annoying, it was necessary because you're writing a teenager, but it just added a little extra to her character, and I appreciated it, that's for sure. So this is kind of the end of the spoiler-free version. I hope I didn't really give too much away in terms of plot. So again, I'll show you the book. I would give this book a 4 out of 5. Based on the summary I just gave, you can tell that my likes for this book really outweighed my dislikes. The 4 out of 5 stars really is based upon the nerdiness and geek culture that was in the book, the fact that I found the characters so relatable, and just the fact that this book was a really fun read, and I didn't find tons of plot holes, and the ones that were there didn't affect my enjoyment of the story. That being said, it's only a 4 out of 5 and not a 5, because again, it's not the most perfect book. I talk about shallow villain motives and stuff, and it's just, they could have done more with it, but overall, 4 out of 5. And as I said, that concludes my spoiler-free half. Hey guys, it's Nikki. I'm just here to announce my first virtual book club of the month book. I will be reviewing it at the end of January if you want to join me. And this month's book is 99 Red Balloons, and it's by Elisabeth Carpenter. It sounds really good, sounds a little bit like a thriller, kind of psychological thriller. I'm excited to dig in, and I hope you guys are too. I'll see you at the end of the month and to tell you what I thought. Bye!